The millionaire was shocked when he saw his maid protecting his special child, and his reaction was, "This story interested you? Subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's begin." It was dawn at the Sterling Medical Institute, one of the most modern hospitals in the country, located in the heart of the city that gives the complex its name. On the most restricted floor, surrounded by bulletproof glass, trained security guards, and an uninterrupted surveillance structure, the medical team fought a silent battle for the recovery of Edward Villela, the tech magnate who had revolutionized hospital automation systems and artificial intelligence in the United States, a nationally known name, with enough wealth to buy the entire hospital if he wished. However, in that intensive care unit bed, not all his power and wealth seemed enough to stop the advance of a mysterious condition that in a few days had taken him from a meeting with investors to a clinical state considered worrying by specialists. The crisis room gathered doctors from New York City, Miami, Chicago, and even invited specialists from abroad. Cardiologists, neurologists, toxicologists, and researchers in rare diseases had already examined the reports, performed experimental protocols, tested unconventional medications, and even resorted to the AI developed by Villela Advanced Technology itself. No conclusive results. Vital signs fluctuated in sudden peaks and drops, but tests continued to show no significant anomalies. Everything seemed within parameters, and yet the patient showed a slow and constant worsening, as if he were being shut down from the inside out. "I can't understand what's happening," commented Dr. Bianca Mendoza, head of the medical team, adjusting her glasses as she analyzed the new results arriving in her hands. "The tests don't indicate any known pattern of degenerative or infectious disease. It's as if his organism is collapsing for no apparent reason." Beside her, Dr. Renard Travers, a respected general practitioner at the institution, nodded in agreement. At 58, with over 3 decades dedicated to medicine, he rarely encountered such disconcerting cases. "We need to think outside the box, Bianca. We are facing something that conventional protocols cannot identify." Behind the scenes, the tension was almost palpable. Each new clinical failure was followed by emergency meetings, tired glances, and finally resigned silences. Doctors no longer spoke of rapid recovery, but of prolonged stabilization. The words critical condition began to appear in reports with increasing frequency. The Sterling Medical Institute, known nationally as the epicenter of health innovation, could not afford to fail with a patient of this caliber. After all, much of the computational systems that managed the hospital itself had been developed by Edward Villella's company. The irony was not lost. The man who created technologies to save lives was now at the mercy of those same technologies, which seemed powerless in the face of his mysterious condition. In the VIP lounge adjacent to the ICU, Eloise Villela, Edward's wife, maintained a constant vigil. A strong woman, a successful businesswoman in sustainable fashion, she managed both personal anguish and the practical issues that arose hourly. She received calls from partners, reassured her teenage children studying abroad, and still found energy to question every medical decision with surgical precision. "The results of the latest MRI have arrived," Eloise informed Dr. Gus Paxton, a neurologist specially called from New York City. "We continue to find no significant brain alterations." Eloise sighed, massaging her temples. "It's been 5 days, doctor. 5 days and you still have no concrete answers. How is it possible that with all this technology, with all these specialists, no one can identify what's happening to my husband?" The frustration in her voice was evident but justifiable. For someone accustomed to being in control of all situations, powerlessness was a devastating feeling. Meanwhile, outside the restricted wing, where the corridors began to look ordinary again, where the floors didn't shine as much, and where the silence was interrupted by loudspeaker announcements and banging metal doors, a little girl watched everything. Livia Sutton, 7 years old, was a constant presence around the hospital. She sold flowers on the sidewalks, since her mother, Marcia, was hired as a night cleaning assistant. With the few coins she earned, she helped support both of them. They lived in a small house on the outskirts of Sterling City, and sometimes, with permission from maintenance management, they stayed longer at the hospital when shifts extended. For most employees, she was just Marcia's daughter, discreet, polite, always with a teddy bear in her hands, and a gaze too attentive for someone her age. "Livia, You need to stay quiet here, okay? Mommy's going to clean Sector 5 and we'll be right back, Marcia explained, adjusting the light blue uniform she wore. Don't leave this bench, don't talk to strangers, and please don't go into any rooms. The girl nodded, hugging her worn teddy bear. Her large brown eyes, curious and intelligent, already knew every corner of that hospital better than many employees. Ever since her father, Charles Sutton, had been admitted there months ago with a mysterious condition, Livia had developed a peculiar interest in everything related to medicine. Charles, a construction worker, had spent weeks in the hospital after experiencing shortness of breath at work. Tests found no clear explanations. In a few days he could no longer eat, walk or speak without difficulty. He also felt a strange taste in his mouth, saying everything smelled like burnt sugar. Doctors tried several treatments, but recovery was slow and left sequelae. He was still in rehabilitation, unable to return to work, which had forced Marcia to take on 2 jobs to support the family. That particular night, something deeply bothered Livia. The smell coming from the VIP wing was familiar, sweetish, almost like bakery perfume or children's syrup medicine, but with a bitter metallic undertone she couldn't ignore. This same smell had been present in her father's room during his hospitalization. Livia had tried to tell the nurses that the smell in the room was strange. None of them paid attention. Curiosity, a striking feature of her personality, made her momentarily forget the promise made to her mother. When she saw one of the nursing assistants drop an ID badge in the corridor, she didn't hesitate to pick it up. She had no intention of doing anything wrong, just returning the lost item. But as she approached the restricted area, her heart raced with the memory of her father. The same smell, the same symptoms she had heard the doctors discuss. "Excuse me," she timidly called out to a passing nurse. "Doesn't this smell seem strange to you?" The professional, hurried and visibly tired, barely looked at the girl. "What smell, dear?" "I don't smell anything." "You shouldn't be here. This is a restricted area." Livia tried to insist, but the nurse was already walking away, leaving her with her doubts and concerns. The memory of her father's suffering made her stomach clench. He had only improved when he was transferred to another room, away from that peculiar smell. And now the same odor hung in the air of the wing where the rich man everyone was talking about in the corridors was staying. At the end of that corridor, a figure in a white lab coat observed everything with interest. Carla Mendoza, 38, head nurse of the Special Medications Department, noticed the little girl with curiosity. She approached with a calculatedly gentle smile. "Hello, little one. You're Marcia's daughter, aren't you? What are you doing here alone?" Livia looked up, meeting the woman's well-made-up face. There was something in her eyes that didn't match her smile. "I'm waiting for my mom to finish work," she replied, pressing the teddy bear against her chest. "There's a strange smell here, just like there was in my dad's room when he got sick." Carla's smile flickered for an instant, almost imperceptibly. "Smell? I don't smell anything special. Maybe it's just the cleaning product your mother uses," she said, recomposing her friendly expression. "You shouldn't be wandering around here, you know. This department is only for staff and doctors." "But the smell—" "There's no smell, dear," Carla interrupted a little more firmly. "Now let's go find your mother, shall we? She must be worried." As Carla led Livia back to the main lobby, the girl looked over her shoulder at the room where she knew the important patient was. She was sure of what she had smelled, just as she was sure the nurse was lying about not noticing the odor. Adults always lied when they didn't want to explain complicated things to children. In the intensive care room, Edward Villela had another seizure. His body suddenly convulsed, causing the equipment alarms to blare in unison. The medical team rushed to stabilize him, applying emergency protocols with the precision of a well-rehearsed orchestra. "Blood pressure dropping. Saturation at 82%, shouted one of the nurses. "Administer 5 mg of epinephrine now," commanded Dr. Renard Travers, who had just entered the room after being called urgently. The next few minutes were of absolute tension. Eloise watched everything through the glass, her hands pressed against her mouth to stifle the scream that threatened to escape. Beside her, Dr. Bianca narrated what was happening, trying to offer some comfort amidst the chaos. "We're doing everything possible. Eloise, Dr. Renard's team is the best we have." After 20 agonizing minutes, Edward's vital signs stabilized again. The businessman, once so powerful and imposing, now looked terribly fragile amidst the tubes and machines. His face, normally tanned and full of life, displayed a frightening pallor. In the corridor, Carla observed everything with apparent professional concern. She checked some notes on her clipboard, made a gesture of sorrow to Eloise, and headed towards the hospital pharmacy. Her walk was determined, confident. No one would question her presence or her actions. After all, she had been part of the institution for almost 10 years, respected by everyone, and with practically unrestricted access to all areas. The toxicology tests came back negative again, Doctor. Gus commented to Dr. Renard as they left the ICU. We checked everything. Heavy metals, industrial solvents, volatile organic compounds. Nothing. There's something we're missing, Renard replied, running a hand through his grey hair. A condition that progresses so rapidly, without apparent cause, in a man who was perfectly healthy a week ago. It doesn't make sense. The neurological symptoms are confusing, alternating between lethargy and agitation, mental confusion, progressive loss of motor coordination. It could be some type of rare encephalopathy, but the tests show no brain lesions. And what about the autoimmune hypothesis? Perhaps his own body is attacking the nervous system. Possible, but it wouldn't explain the rapidity of progression nor the absence of inflammatory markers in the tests. The conversation continued as they walked down the corridor, two brilliant minds trying to decipher a medical enigma that seemed to defy all scientific logic. As they turned the corner, they almost tripped over Livia, who had once again escaped from the area where she was supposed to wait for her mother. "Hey, little one, you shouldn't be here," Dr. Renard said, recognizing the cleaning lady's daughter. Livia looked up, her eyes meeting the doctor's. There was an unusual seriousness on her childish face. "Doctor, is that important man feeling a bad taste in his mouth, like metal or burnt sugar?" The question caught Renard by surprise. Indeed, before losing consciousness, Edward had complained exactly about that to Eloise, who mentioned the fact during the initial anamnesis. "How do you know that?" "My dad felt the same thing, and there was the same smell in his room, a bitter almond smell, but sweet at the same time." Dr. Gus looked at the girl with a mixture of disregard and condescension. "Renard, we need to continue our discussion. The child probably overheard something in the corridors and is just repeating it." But Renard couldn't ignore Livia's comment. A bitter almond smell was too specific a symptom to be a coincidence or childish imagination. It was a classic indicator, albeit rare, in certain types of poisoning. Poisoning that would not easily show up in standard toxicology tests. "Livia, isn't it? Can you tell me more about what happened to your father?" Before the girl could answer, Marcia appeared in the corridor, visibly distressed. "Livia," I told, "you're not to leave that bench. I'm sorry, doctor, she shouldn't be bothering you." "She's not bothering me," Renard replied thoughtfully. "In fact, she was telling me something potentially important." Marcia pulled her daughter closer, suspicious. Years of working in cleaning services had taught her that attracting the attention of superiors was rarely a positive thing. "Important. She's just a child, doctor. She has a vivid imagination." "Mum, it's the same smell. It's the same as was in Dad's room, and the nurse pretended she didn't smell it." "Which nurse?" Renard asked, suddenly interested. "The pretty one, with red lipstick. She said I was imagining things." Renard and Gus exchanged glances. There were no nurses with red lipstick on the ICU team. It was against protocol to wear heavy makeup when attending to critical patients. "Marcia, would you mind if I talked a little more with your daughter tomorrow? I promise I won't take up too much of your time." The woman hesitated, her maternal protective instinct fighting against the fear of contradicting a superior. "It's about the important patient, isn't it? I don't want any trouble, doctor. I need this job." "There will be no trouble, Marcia. On the contrary, your daughter may have noticed something that all of us with our experience and technology missed." In the hospital pharmacy, Carla carefully manipulated some vials. Her face, previously smiling, now displayed absolute concentration. She was alone in the room, taking advantage of the break between shifts. With precise movements, she prepared something in an ordinary-looking syringe, identical to the thousands used daily in the hospital. "This time it will work," she murmured to herself, putting the material in a special compartment of her bag. "This time there will be no failures." Her cell phone vibrated, showing a message that made her frown. "We have a problem," the child noticed. "Take care of it." Carla's expression hardened. She had not foreseen this complication. A 7-year-old girl should not be an obstacle to her meticulously elaborated plans. But Livia, with her unusual perceptiveness and attentive gaze, had become precisely that, an unforeseen variable in an equation that should have been perfect. Taking a deep breath, Carla recomposed her professional facade. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let everything fall apart now. The next move would need to be calculated with even greater precision. In the hospital parking lot, under the dim light of the streetlights, a black BMW waited with its engine running. Inside, a shadowy figure repeatedly checked his watch. When Carla finally appeared, quickly descending the steps of the service entrance, the driver let out a sigh of relief. "Is everything according to plan?" he asked as soon as she got into the vehicle. "Almost everything," Carla replied, buckling her seatbelt. "We have a small complication, but nothing that can't be resolved." The car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the sterling city night, while on the upper floors of the hospital, monitors continued to register the oscillating vital signs of Edward Villela, a man whose life had become the center of a plot far more complex than anyone could imagine. In her small apartment, Livia lay on the makeshift bed in the living room, while her mother prepared tea in the tiny kitchen. Her thoughts couldn't stray from the sick man and the familiar smell she had felt. She hugged her teddy bear tightly, as if the toy could offer answers to the questions multiplying in her childish mind. "Dad also got better when he left that room with the strange smell," she whispered to the teddy bear. "Maybe the rich man could also get better if they did the same." Marcia watched her daughter with concern. The conversation with the doctor had left her uneasy. Livia had always been an observant child, with a sensitivity that sometimes frightened her, but getting involved in the medical affairs of such an important patient was dangerous. The Sterling Medical Institute was her livelihood. She couldn't risk losing her job because of her daughter's fantasies. "Livia, tomorrow you're going to Mrs. Zelda's house, okay? It's not good for you to spend so much time at the hospital." "But Mom, I promised the doctor I'd tell him more about the smell." "That's adult business, honey. Let the doctors take care of their patient." As mother and daughter talked in the luxurious penthouse of the Montserrat Tower, one of Sterling City's most exclusive residential buildings, a tense meeting was taking place. 3 people spoke in low voices around a dining table that had never served meals. "The situation is getting complicated," said a middle-aged man, his glasses reflecting the indirect light. "If Villela recovers and finds out what we're doing—" "He won't recover," interrupted an elegant woman, pouring herself more wine. "The plan is working. In a few days, Villela Advanced Technology will be vulnerable enough for our buyout offer. It will be seen as a gesture of generosity in a time of crisis." "What if someone finds out?" questioned the third participant, a nervous-looking young man. "We've heard rumors that a child is talking about strange smells in his room." The woman laughed, a cold, calculated sound that didn't match her sophisticated appearance. "A child? Seriously? No one will believe a 7-year-old girl against a respected institution like the Sterling Medical Institute. Besides, we have people strategically positioned. Nothing will go wrong." The confidence in her voice was absolute, as if Edward Villella's fate was already sealed, regardless of medical efforts or the observations of a curious little girl. The next morning, Dr. A. Renard Travers arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. He had spent a good part of the night researching symptoms similar to Edward Villella's in medical articles and international databases. Livia's mention of the bitter almond smell had triggered an alert in his trained mind. It was a classic indicator that could go unnoticed amidst the sophistication of modern tests. "Good morning, Caroline," he greeted the lab technician who was already organizing her materials for the start of the shift. "I need you to run an additional test on Mr. Villella's samples." Caroline Montrose, 45, looked up from the meticulously arranged test tubes. "More tests? We've already run practically every known protocol, Doctor." "Not all," Renard replied, handing her a handwritten requisition. "I want a specific screening for cyanides and derivatives." The technician frowned, examining the paper. Cyanide? That's unusual. We would have detected it in other tests if it were a significant amount. Not necessarily. In small, frequent doses, it might not show up in conventional tests, especially if administered in a form that gradually releases the compound into the body. Caroline hesitated, her gaze meeting the doctor's. Doctor, that would suggest intentional poisoning. That's a serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone, Caroline. I'm just investigating all possibilities. The symptoms are compatible, and we had a similar case a few months ago, the father of the cleaning lady's daughter. Charles Sutton, but he recovered, albeit with sequelae. Exactly, and I want to know why. I want to compare the cases, understand what might be happening. Please keep this confidential for now. Just you and me. The technician nodded, tucking the requisition into her lab coat pocket. Years of experience told her that Dr. Renard was not a man of conspiracy theories or unfounded alarmism. If he suspected something so serious, there were concrete reasons for it. Meanwhile, at the hospital reception, Marcia arrived with Livia. Against her initial will, she had decided to bring her daughter for the promised conversation with the doctor. The sleepless night and the girl's insistence had broken her resistance. Remember, Livia, you'll talk to the doctor and then go straight to Mrs. Zelda's house. I don't want you wandering around the hospital today. Yes. Mom, the girl replied, but her eyes were already scanning the environment, as if looking for something or someone. In the meeting room adjacent to the ICU, the medical team responsible for Edward Villela conducted another round of discussions about the case. Dr. Bianca presented the latest results, trying to maintain professional optimism, although the news was not encouraging. Liver and kidney functions have begun to show signs of impairment. If we continue without identifying the cause, we will have to consider the possibility of dialysis in the coming days. Eloise Villela, sitting in the corner of the room, remained upright despite her evident fatigue. Her deep dark circles contrasted with the unwavering elegance of her attire and posture. How long can he last under these conditions? She asked, her voice controlled. The question caused an uncomfortable silence among the doctors. It was Dr. Gus who finally answered. It's difficult to predict with certainty, Mrs. Villela. Your husband is a strong man in excellent physical condition for his age. That works in his favor. But if the deterioration continues at this rate in 1 or 2 weeks, he didn't complete the sentence. He didn't need to. The weight of the unspoken filled the room like a tangible presence. At that moment, Dr. Renard entered, apologizing for the delay. His eyes met Eloise's, and he noticed the silent despair behind the businesswoman's facade of control. Something in his gaze must have betrayed his suspicions, for Bianca immediately asked, "Any news, Renard?" "You seem to have had an idea," he hesitated. Exposing his suspicions prematurely, without concrete evidence, could create unnecessary pandemonium. On the other hand, every lost hour meant more damage to Edward's body. "I requested some additional tests," he replied cautiously. "Perhaps we are facing a case of toxicity that doesn't show up in standard protocols." "Toxicity?" Eloise repeated, adjusting in her chair. "What kind of toxicity? I prefer not to speculate until I have the results. But I spoke yesterday with a small patient, an employee's daughter, who made interesting observations about similar symptoms her father presented when he was hospitalized here." Gus subtly rolled his eyes. He still considered it absurd to give credit to a child's words. "With all due respect, Renard, I don't think we should guide our conduct based on what a 7-year-old girl thinks she saw or felt. And with all due respect, Gus, we're not making much progress with our conventional approaches, are we?" Renard countered, with more firmness than he intended. Turning to Eloise, he continued, "The girl's father presented curiously similar symptoms to your husband's, including the sensation of a metallic taste and a peculiar odor she described as bitter almonds." The mention of the metallic taste made Eloise stand up abruptly. "Edward mentioned that several times before he got worse. He said everything tasted metallic, especially the water. We even changed the bottles, thinking it might be the container." The statement caused a murmur among the doctors present. Bianca quickly consulted her notes. "Indeed, that's in the initial history, but we didn't give it much weight because it's a symptom present in dozens of different conditions." "And the other patient, the girl's father, how is he now?" Eloise asked, a new hope kindling in her eyes. He partially recovered, Renard explained. He still has neurological sequelae, problems with motor coordination, but he's alive. The curious thing is that his improvement began when he was transferred to another room, away from the smell the daughter mentioned. The meeting continued for a few more minutes, with the team divided between skepticism and interest in the new possibilities raised. In the end, it was agreed that Edward would be transferred to another wing, as a precaution, while awaiting the results of the new tests. In the corridor, Renard found Marcia and Livia waiting. As agreed. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading them to a small consultation room. "Livia, can you tell me more about what happened to your father? Any detail could be important." The girl looked at her mother, seeking approval, and received an almost imperceptible nod. Taking a deep breath, she began to narrate, with the surprising precision of someone who had experienced every moment with full attention. Daddy started feeling sick at work. He was out of breath, like he'd run a lot. Then he started feeling a bad taste in his mouth, like metal and sweet at the same time. He said even the water tasted like that. Then he came to the hospital, stayed in that room with the strange smell. What exactly did it smell like, Livia? Like burnt cookies, but also something bad, bitter. Like those almonds we eat at Christmas, but spoiled. Renard made quick notes, impressed by the clarity of the description. Children often have sharper senses than adults, less contaminated by distractions and preconceptions. And when did your father start to get better? When they moved him to another room. I complained a lot about the smell, but no one believed me. Then one day, the short doctor with glasses believed me and told them to move Dad. After that, he started to get less worse. Do you remember who visited your father? Any particular nurse? Livia frowned, concentrating. There was a pretty nurse with red lipstick. She always came when the other doctors left. She said it was to give special medicines to Dad. She gave me candies and told me I shouldn't tell anyone she was there. Marcia looked at her daughter, surprised. You never told me that, Livia. She said it was a secret, Mom, that it was a special treatment that I couldn't tell anyone about. And she gave me tasty candies. Renard felt a shiver run down his spine. The description of the nurse matched Carla Mendoza, responsible for the special medications pharmacy. But why would she be administering unregistered medications to a regular patient? And why ask a child to keep it a secret? Livia, have you seen this same nurse here recently? Perhaps near Mr. Villela's room? The girl nodded vigorously. Yes, she was there yesterday. She was the one who took me back to the lobby when I mentioned the smell. The doctor exchanged a significant look with Marcia, whose expression now wavered between concern and fear. Dr. Renard, this is very serious. Are you suggesting that someone might be intentionally poisoning patients? I'm not suggesting anything yet, Marcia. I'm just gathering information. But I greatly appreciate your cooperation. Livia, you are a very observant and brave girl. The child smiled, proud of the compliment, not fully understanding the gravity of what her observations implied. After dismissing mother and daughter, Renard quickly headed to the hospital administration office. He needed to check work schedules, pharmacy access logs, and, most importantly, security camera footage. His methodical medical mind began to formulate a disturbing hypothesis, but he needed concrete evidence before proceeding. At the hospital pharmacy counter, Carla methodically organized a series of medications for distribution. Her face displayed the usual professional serenity, but her eyes registered every movement in the corridor. She noticed when Renard hurried towards administration, and a slight furrowing of her brow betrayed her concern. Her cell phone vibrated discreetly. The message was brief. He's investigating. Access the system and clear the records now. With calculated movements, Carla finished what she was doing, locked the controlled medications drawer, and went to her workstation. As the person responsible for the pharmaceutical distribution system, she had privileged access to the medication database. A few minutes of work would be enough to eliminate any digital trace that could compromise her. In the hospital parking lot, the same black BMW from the previous night waited. The driver, an ordinary-looking man with a watchful gaze, observed the main entrance through the rearview mirror. His phone rang. Yes? We have a bigger problem than we imagined. The doctor is investigating. The girl is talking too much. And the plan? It continues. But we need to be more careful and deal with the interferences. The man hung up without answering, his gaze now fixed on the figures of Marcia and Livia as they left the hospital. He memorized their faces, their clothes, their walk. Information that could soon be useful. In the administration office, Renard faced hospital bureaucracy in the form of the administrative director, Sandra Alton. "I need the security camera footage from the VIP wing for the last 7 days, Sandra. It's urgent." The middle-aged woman, with a permanently suspicious expression, adjusted her glasses on her thin nose. "That's highly irregular. Dr. Travers, we need a formal request, approved by the Ethics Committee and General Management, not to mention the legal implications of—" "Sandra," Renard interrupted, leaning over the desk, "I believe we have an extremely serious situation on our hands. A VIP patient is dying without explanation, and I have reasons to suspect it's not due to natural causes. Do you really want me to present this theory to the board before investigating properly?" The mention of the word dying in relation to Edward Villela made the director pale. A negative outcome for a patient of that caliber would mean not only a human tragedy, but a public relations disaster for the Institute. "Give me an hour," she finally conceded. "I'll arrange access to the recordings. But this stays between us for now." Renard nodded, satisfied with the small victory. As he left the room, he almost collided with Carla, who was passing through the corridor with a clipboard in her hands. "Oh, excuse me, Doctor. I didn't see you." "No problem, Carla," he replied automatically, before noticing the red lipstick she was wearing, exactly as Livia had described. Their gazes met for a tense instant. Something in the doctor's expression must have alerted Carla, as her professional smile wavered momentarily. "Is Mr. Villela still stable?" she asked in an attempt at normalcy. "Actually, we're transferring him to another wing. We need a more controlled environment for the new tests." The nurse nodded, but Renard noticed the slight tightening of her fingers on the clipboard. "Of course, that makes sense. Well, I have to continue my rounds. Excuse me, Doctor." As she walked away, Renard made a mental note to check Carla Mendoza's credentials more thoroughly. Something in his medical instinct, refined by decades of practice, told him she was an important piece of the puzzle he was trying to assemble. In the ICU, a team prepared Edward Villela for transfer. Eloise supervised every detail, her gaze alternating between her unconscious husband and the professionals surrounding him. When Renard entered, she immediately approached him. "Doctor, this transfer, will it really help?" "It's a precautionary measure, Mrs. Villela. We are investigating the possibility of some environmental factor contributing to your husband's condition." "Environmental factor? Like what?" Renard chose his words carefully. "It could be anything, from a cleaning product he's sensitive to some substance in the air conditioning. For the point is to isolate variables." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it omitted his true suspicions. Until he had concrete evidence, creating panic would be irresponsible. "Did you notice anyone strange visiting your husband? Perhaps a professional who wasn't part of the regular team?" Eloise reflected for a moment. "There were so many people coming and going. Nurses, technicians, specialists. Impossible to keep track of everyone. But Edward was always very cautious about his health. He would never accept unconventional treatments or experimental medications." "And before hospitalization? Did he mention feeling unwell, having unusual symptoms?" "Now that you mention it, he had been complaining of excessive fatigue in recent weeks. We thought it was just stress. The company is expanding, negotiating international partnerships. He also commented on a strange taste in the office water. We even changed the filter." Renard made more mental notes. The picture was beginning to make sense. Prolonged exposure, gradual symptoms, accelerated worsening after hospitalization. But the motive was missing. Who would have an interest in harming Edward Villela to the point of risking his life? As the team completed the transfer to an isolated room in another wing, Renard received a call from Caroline, the lab technician. "Doctor, the results of the specific test. You need to see this immediately." Her tone made it clear that the news was significant. Renard quickened his pace towards the laboratory, passing through the corridor where, hours earlier, he had spoken with Livia. That child's perceptiveness had possibly saved Edward Villela's life, and perhaps that of other patients who could become future victims. In Marcia's apartment, the atmosphere was tense. Contrary to what she had promised the doctor, She had not taken Livia to Mrs. Zelda's house. Something in Renard's expression upon hearing her daughter's account had deeply frightened her. If his suspicions were correct, Livia could be in danger for knowing too much. "Let's play a game, honey," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "We're going to stay very quiet here at home today. No television, no noise, as if we were hiding." Livia, sitting on the floor of the small living room with her teddy bear, looked up with curious eyes. "Hiding from whom, Mom?" "It's just a game, dear. To see how long we can stay silent." The girl didn't seem convinced, but nodded. Children have a special intuition for perceiving adult fear, even when disguised as a game. Marcia checked again that the door was locked and the curtains closed. She didn't know exactly what she was afraid of, but the doctor's questions, his reaction to hearing about the mysterious nurse, and especially the mention of possible poisoning, had awakened a primitive terror in her mother's heart. Her cell phone rang, making her jump. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Marcia Sutton. This is Dr. Renard Travers. Where are you and Livia now?" The urgency in his voice made her stomach drop. "At home, doctor." "What? Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't answer to anyone. I'm sending a trusted security guard to pick you up. I'll confirm when he arrives." "Don't worry, it's just a preventive measure." "Preventive against what, doctor?" she asked, her voice almost failing. There was a brief pause before the answer. "The tests confirmed my suspicions, Marcia. Your husband and Mr. Villela were exposed to a toxic substance, deliberately, and the person responsible may know that Livia identified her." Marcia's blood ran cold. She instinctively hugged her daughter, as if she could protect her with her body against an invisible threat. "How long until your security guard arrives?" 20 minutes at most. Stay calm and wait." In the hospital laboratory, Renard examined the test results with growing concern. Caroline had detected unequivocal traces of a cyanide derivative compound, not in lethal quantities at once, but in sufficient concentration to, with prolonged exposure, cause progressive deterioration of vital systems. "It's terrifying," Caroline commented, pointing to the graphs. "The substance seems to have been administered in a way that gradually releases the toxic component. This would explain why it didn't show up in conventional tests and why the symptoms progressed so peculiarly." "We need more samples," Renard decided. "I want to test everything that was in contact with the patient. Serum, medications, even the water he drank." "And the other case you mentioned?" "The girl's father, Charles Sutton. I'll request that we rerun the tests on the archived samples, if we still have them. And we need to interview all employees who had direct access to Mr. Villela since his admission." "You think it's someone from the hospital?" Renard hesitated before answering. "It has to be someone with medical knowledge and access to controlled substances, someone who could move freely through the ICU without raising suspicion. And, most importantly, someone with a motive." In the corridor, without them noticing, Carla walked slowly, catching fragments of the conversation. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes had lost their professional sparkle, replaced by something cold and calculating. She continued walking until she turned the corner, then pulled out her cell phone and quickly typed, "Confirmed, they know. We need to act now." In the penthouse of the Montserrat Tower, the same elegant woman from the previous night received the message with an unperturbed expression. She took a sip of her tea before responding, "Clean everything. No traces. As for the child and the mother, bring them. We need to have a talk." In Marcia's modest apartment, the wall clock marked 20 minutes since the doctor's call. Mother and daughter waited in tense silence, startled by every noise from the external corridor. When the doorbell finally rang, Marcia cautiously approached the door. "Who is it?" "Security from the Sterling Medical Institute. Dr. Renard sent me. What's your name?" "Robert Hayes, the doctor must have mentioned." Marcia frowned. Renard had not mentioned any name. With her heart racing, she backed away from the door and picked up her cell phone. "One moment," she shouted, as she dialed the doctor's number with trembling fingers. On the other side of the door, the man who identified himself as Robert exchanged a look with Carla, who waited a few steps behind, out of sight of the peephole. "She's suspicious," he whispered. "Probably calling the doctor." Carla nodded, her face now a mask of cold determination. "We don't have time for subtleties. Force the entry." In the hospital laboratory, Renard's phone rang. Seeing Marcia's name on the display, he answered immediately. "Marcia? Has security arrived? There's a man at the door saying you sent him. Robert Hayes, is that true? Renard's blood ran cold. He hadn't sent anyone named Robert. Marcia, listen carefully. Don't open the door. I'm calling the police right now. Grab Livia and... A violent crash interrupted the conversation. Renard heard Marcia's muffled scream, followed by a commotion and Livia's frightened cry. Then silence. Marcia? Marcia! No one answered. The call continued, but all that could be heard was background noise as if the phone had fallen to the floor. Then a female voice, distant but audible. Get them both. No visible injuries. Hand quickly. Renard recognized the voice immediately. It was Carla Mendoza. Despair overcame Renard. Phone still in hand, he rushed out of the lab, shouting instructions to Caroline. Call the police! Say there's been a home invasion and possible kidnapping. The address is on Marcia Sutton's employee file. In the corridor, he violently bumped into Eloise Villela, who was coming towards him with a worried expression. Dr. Renard, what's happening? I heard you found something in Edward's tests. There was no time for detailed explanations or subtleties. Mrs. Villela, the situation is more serious than we imagined. Your husband was deliberately poisoned, and the people responsible just kidnapped an employee and her daughter, who could identify them. Eloise's face paled, but unlike the emotional collapse many would expect, her eyes gained a determined glint. Who are they? And what can I do to help? The reaction surprised Renard positively. At that moment, he didn't see the anguished wife, but the resolute businesswoman accustomed to facing crises. I have suspicions, but I need concrete evidence. The main suspect is Carla Mendoza, the pharmacy nurse. I need to find out who is behind her, because she's clearly not acting alone. Villela Tech has a private security department, Eloise said, already dialing on her cell phone. I can have them here in minutes, and we have resources the police would take hours to mobilize. While Eloise alerted her team, Renard rushed to the hospital's security office. He needed the recordings Sandra had promised. On the way, he called the director. Sandra, it's an emergency. Those recordings, they're already available in the internal system, Doctor. But there's something strange. It seems someone tried to access and delete part of the files about an hour ago. Luckily, our automatic backup prevented complete loss. Who tried to delete the files? The login used was from the main pharmacy, Carla Mendoza's terminal. The confirmation of his suspicions brought no satisfaction, only even greater urgency. Upon arriving at the security room, he found the head of the team already viewing the recordings at Sandra's request. Dr. Travers, we were just reviewing the images from the last few days in the VIP wing. And we found something disturbing. On the screens, Renard observed sequences of Carla entering Edward Villela's room at irregular times, always during shift changes or moments of less movement. On several occasions, she manipulated the patient's IV drip, adding substances from small vials that were not part of the official medical protocol. She's injecting something into the IV, something that wasn't prescribed by any doctor on the team, the head of security concluded. We need to identify that compound immediately, Renard said, and find out who else is involved. She clearly isn't acting alone. One of the security operators drew attention to another screen. Doctor, we found images of her regularly talking to this man in the parking lot. Their black BMW always parked in the visitor area. The man in the image was the same one who had identified himself as Robert Hayes at Marcia's door. The connection was established. At that moment, Eloise entered the room, accompanied by two men of discreet appearance but postures that betrayed military training. My team is ready, Doctor, and I've already alerted my contacts at the federal police. Given the deliberate attempt against Edward's life, we have jurisdiction for a coordinated operation. One of the men stepped forward, introducing himself as Roderick Nash, head of security for Villela Tech. We are already tracking Marcia Sutton's cell phone, Doctor, and we have teams positioned at the main exits of the city. We need to know more about this nurse and her accomplices. Her name is Carla Mendoza, Renard informed. She's worked here for almost 10 years. Always had an exemplary record. I need to understand what led her to this. Eloise studied the camera images carefully. The man in the BMW, I recognize him. He was in a meeting with our main competitor, Sterling Tech, a few weeks ago. They introduced him as a security consultant, but I had the impression it was something more. Sterling Tech, Renard repeated, processing the information. The company that tried to buy Villela Tech's medical automation division last year. Exactly. Edward refused the offer, even though it was financially attractive. He always said that our medical technology was priceless, that it saved lives and couldn't fall into the wrong hands. The puzzle began to make sense. Corporate sabotage taken to the extreme, eliminating the company owner to force a sale under unfavorable conditions during a moment of crisis. In the penthouse apartment of the Montserrat Tower, Marcia and Livia sat on a luxurious sofa, watched intently by Carla and the man who had identified himself as Robert. The elegant woman commanding the operation walked slowly through the spacious room, wineglass in hand, studying the two hostages with clinical curiosity. "Do you know who I am?" she finally asked, stopping before them. Marcia, protectively hugging Livia, shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. "My name is Claudia Sterling. I am CEO of Sterling Tech." The name was familiar. Marcia had seen it in business magazines and in advertisements for the hospital itself. Sterling Tech was one of the largest medical technology companies in the country, a direct rival of Villela Tech. "Why are we here?" "We haven't done anything to you." Claudia smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Directly, no. But your daughter has eyes and ears too sharp for a child. And you, my dear, had the misfortune of having a husband who served as, let's say, an initial experiment." Livia, despite her fear, stared fixedly at Carla. "You gave my dad strange medicines. Medicines that made him taste bad." The nurse averted her gaze, showing the first sign of genuine discomfort. "It was necessary," she justified, more to herself than to the hostages. "We needed to test the dosage, the effects, the action time." "Test?" Marcia repeated, horrified. "My husband was your guinea pig? And for what? So you could poison Mr. Villela later." Claudia interrupted the conversation with an impatient gesture. "Technical details don't matter now. What matters is that you know too much. So especially your daughter, with her inconveniently sensitive sense of smell and loose tongue." Robert, until then silent, spoke up. "We need to act fast, Claudia. The doctor has probably already alerted the police. And Villela's wife has resources." "Calm down," she replied, showing no concern. "This penthouse is registered under an offshore company. Nothing connects us to it. We have time to decide what to do with our guests." The casual tone with which she discussed their fate made Marcia hug Livia even tighter. The girl, however, kept her gaze fixed on Carla, as if trying to understand how someone who seemed so normal could do something so terrible. "Why did you hurt my dad?" she asked directly, her childish voice carrying a maturity forced by the circumstances. "He never did anything to you." Carla seemed uncomfortable with the direct question, but Claudia answered before she could elaborate any justification. "Business, dear. Your father was an investment, nothing personal." At the Sterling Medical Institute, the operation to locate Marcia and Livia advanced rapidly. Villela Tech's security team, in cooperation with federal police officers who were beginning to arrive, had established a makeshift command center in a conference room. "Marcia's cell phone has been located," Roderick informed. "It's moving following Kingsway Highway." "It's a distraction," Eloise immediately concluded. "They threw the phone into a vehicle to divert us." "How can you be sure?" one of the police officers asked. "Because that's what I would do. It's too tactical, too obvious. They want us far from the real location." Renard, who was monitoring everything while coordinating Edward's care, suggested, "The other man who was at the night meeting." "The nervous younger one." "Who was he?" Eloise frowned, trying to remember. "Theo Mendoza, a talented programmer who worked at Villela Tech for years until he was fired for trying to access restricted servers. Edward suspected he was trying to steal proprietary code." "Mendoza? Like Carla Mendoza?" The coincidence of surnames raised an alarm. "They are siblings," Eloise confirmed after a quick check on her tablet. "Theo was hired by Sterling Tech shortly after his dismissal from our company. Carla must have been recruited by him for the scheme. Can you get his address?" "I'm checking now." "He owns a penthouse apartment in the Montserrat Tower." Roderick immediately mobilized his team. "Montserrat is less than 10 minutes from here. We can have a team there in 5. In the luxurious apartment, The situation grew increasingly tense. Robert had received information that the net was closing in. Police were starting to patrol the neighborhood, and public security cameras had recorded the BMW entering the building's parking lot. "We need to get out of here now," he insisted, nervousness evident in his voice. "Use the hostages as leverage if necessary." Claudia, still maintaining an appearance of calm, shook her head. "So amateurish. We don't use hostages. That would only escalate the situation to a formal kidnapping, with all the associated legal implications. No, we need to be smarter." Her cell phone rang. After a brief conversation, her demeanor changed. For the first time, concern broke through her mask of control. "Vilela is improving. The transfer to another room and the antidote treatment are reversing the effects, and the federal police are involved now." Carla paled. "That wasn't in the plan. You guaranteed it would be undetectable, that it would look like a natural medical condition. And it would be, if not for a 7-year-old child with a nose sensitive to cyanide," Claudia retorted acidly, looking at Livia with a mixture of anger and reluctant admiration. Robert discreetly checked his weapon, a gesture not lost on Marcia. "What are you going to do with us?" she asked, trying to keep her voice firm despite the terror she felt. Claudia observed mother and daughter for long seconds, evaluating options. Finally she sighed. "Nothing. You are our insurance now, our guarantee of safe passage." Turning to Robert and Carla, she gave quick instructions. "Prepare the helicopter on the helipad. We'll take them both to the border, then release them at some remote point. When they're safe, we'll negotiate the next steps." The plan seemed reasonable given the circumstances, but Carla was hesitant. "What about Vilela? All this work for nothing?" "Vilela no longer matters," Claudia replied dryly. "The original plan failed. Now we're in damage control mode. Unless you'd prefer to spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary." The mention of prison made Carla swallow hard. She looked at Livia, who continued to observe her with those disturbingly perceptive eyes. For a moment, something like regret crossed her face, but it was soon replaced by the professional coldness she had cultivated for years. At the hospital, while the police operation was being organized, Renard received encouraging news about Edward Vilela. The treatment with the specific antidote for cyanide poisoning was working. His vital signs were gradually improving, and there were already moments of consciousness, albeit brief. "He woke up for a few minutes," one of the nurses reported. He asked for his wife, seemed confused, but recognized where he was. "Excellent," Renard replied, allowing himself the first sigh of relief since he began investigating the case. "Maintain antidote administration according to protocol, and monitor for any neurological changes." His cell phone vibrated. It was Eloise. "We've located the apartment. Police and our team are positioned. But there's a complication. There's a helicopter on the building's helipad with signs of preparation for takeoff. They're trying to escape," Renard concluded. "And they'll probably take Marcia and Livia as insurance." "Exactly what we thought. The police are requesting authorization for a tactical operation, but the risk to the hostages—" Renard closed his eyes, thinking about the implications. If the operation went wrong, mother and daughter could be seriously injured. If they didn't act, they could disappear forever. "Is there another option?" he asked, knowing that Eloise, with her strategic mind, had probably already considered alternatives. "Perhaps, if we could delay the takeoff, the police have sharpshooters positioned with a view of the helipad. They could disable the helicopter without risk to the occupants. How do we delay without alerting them?" There was a pause before Eloise replied. "Knowing Claudia Sterling, she won't leave without guarantees. She's probably waiting for confirmation of a safe route, or perhaps a substantial deposit into an offshore account. If we could intercept those communications, create false impediments, could your specialist do that?" "They're already trying, and we have another ace up our sleeve. Edward is awake. He knows Claudia, he knows how she thinks. Perhaps he can give us insights on how to proceed." In the penthouse apartment, the tension was palpable. Robert repeatedly checked his watch, while Carla prepared some syringes with what appeared to be a sedative. "To ensure our guests remain cooperative during the flight," she explained. Noting Marcia's horrified look, Livia, who had remained silent for some time, suddenly spoke. "Are you also going to give that medicine to the important man in the hospital? To make him sick again?" The innocent yet perceptive question made Carla frown. No, little one. This one is different, and I won't be going back to the hospital. So the man will get better? The genuine hope in the child's voice contrasted dramatically with the gravity of the situation. Probably, Carla replied with surprising honesty. Dr. Renard is very clever. He must have found the correct antidote. Claudia, who had been on the phone in a secluded corner, hung up abruptly, her face a mask of contained fury. Something is wrong. The transfer confirmation hasn't arrived, and our contact in the control tower says there's unusual police movement in the perimeter. They're surrounding us, Robert concluded, checking his weapon again. Not necessarily. It could just be a coincidence. Either way, we can't wait any longer. We're taking off now. With abrupt gestures, she ordered Marcia and Livia to stand up. The mother rose tremblingly, but keeping her daughter firmly by her side. Please, she pleaded, addressing Carla directly, as she seemed the least ruthless of the three. My daughter is just a child. Let her stay. Take only me. Something in the maternal appeal seemed to touch Carla, who hesitated visibly. Claudia, however, cut off any possibility of negotiation. Both are coming. They are our insurance until the border. Then we'll see. In the helicopter, the pilot was already starting the engines. The noise of the blades cutting through the night air echoed across the rooftop, creating an even more tense atmosphere. Let's go, Claudia ordered, pushing Marcia and Livia towards the aircraft. At that moment, all the external lights of the building went out simultaneously. The helicopter's emergency system activated, bathing the rooftop in a ghostly red light. What's happening? Shouted Robert, drawing his weapon and looking frantically around. Targeted power cut, Claudia concluded, immediately understanding the tactic. They are trying to disorient us. Carla, visibly nervous, pointed to the sky. There's a drone up there. Indeed, a small flying object hovered above the rooftop, its lights flashing in the darkness. Seconds later, her deafening megaphone sound broke the night. Attention, Claudia Sterling, Robert Hayes, and Carla Mendoza. The building is surrounded. There is no escape route. Release the hostages and surrender peacefully. Robert reacted instinctively, pointing his weapon at the drone and firing. The shot missed by meters, but the noise made Livia scream and cling even tighter to her mother. Idiot, Claudia reprimanded. You're only making our situation worse. The momentary distraction was all Marcia needed. With a quick movement, she pushed Livia behind a large decorative plant pot and lunged at Carla, who was carrying the syringes. Both fell to the ground, fighting desperately. Run, Livia, hide! Marcia shouted, trying to immobilize Carla's arms. The girl, paralyzed by fear, couldn't move. Her wide eyes watched the chaos unfolding before her. Robert moved to intervene, but at that exact moment, multiple flashes of light flooded the rooftop. Stun grenades, launched by the tactical team that was now emerging from all entrances. The deafening sound and blinding light created absolute confusion. Claudia, realizing all was lost, made one last desperate attempt. She ran towards the helicopter, shouting at the pilot, "Take off, now!" The pilot, however, had already shut down the engines and raised his hands, surrendering to the police officers who surrounded him. In a matter of seconds, the rooftop was swarming with federal agents and Vilela Tech's security team. Robert was quickly subdued and handcuffed, while Carla, still dazed from the struggle with Marcia, offered no resistance. Claudia, seeing herself cornered, maintained her composure until the end. She adjusted her hair, raised her chin, and offered her wrists for the handcuffs, as if this were just another inconvenience in a complicated business day. This is absurd. You have no proof of anything, she declared, her voice still carrying the authority of someone who commands one of the country's largest companies. Roderick, who led the Vilela Tech team, approached with a restrained smile. Actually, Mrs. Sterling, we have all the necessary evidence. Your communications with Carla and Robert were intercepted. The compound used on Edward Vilela was traced to a subsidiary lab of your company. And we have the testimony of a key witness. He pointed to Livia, who was now in the safe arms of a female agent, while paramedics attended to Marcia, who had suffered some scratches in the fight. Claudia glared at the girl with a mixture of anger and disbelief. A child? That's it? My entire empire brought down because of a child who smells things. Don't underestimate the power of innocent observation, Roderick replied. Sometimes it's precisely those whom no one takes seriously who end up seeing what everyone else misses. As the detainees were led off the rooftop, Marcia ran to hug Livia, both trembling from the shock of the experience. It's over, honey. It's over. You're safe now. Livia, clinging to her mother's neck, whispered, "The pretty lady who gave Dad medicine. She looked sad at the end, Mom, like she didn't want to do bad things." The observation, so typical of childish sensitivity, that sees nuances where adults only see black and white, made Marcia hug her daughter even tighter. Even good people make bad choices sometimes. Livia, the important thing is that you helped stop them from hurting anyone else. At the hospital, Renard received real-time updates on the operation. When confirmation that Marcia and Livia were safe arrived, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Now he could fully concentrate on Edward's recovery. Upon entering the new intensive care unit where the businessman was installed, he found Eloise sitting beside her husband, holding his hand as he slept. The heart monitor showed regular beats, and color was already beginning to return to Edward's previously pale face. "It's over," he simply said. They arrested Claudia Sterling and her accomplices. "Marcia and Livia are fine, just scared." Eloise nodded, silent tears streaming down her usually composed face. "How could she, Renard? How does someone get to this point for business?" The doctor shook his head, equally perplexed by the depth of human malice. "Some people lose their sense of limits, Eloise. Power and ambition can corrupt even the brightest." At that moment, Edward opened his eyes. He was still weak, but his gaze was lucid for the first time in days. "She always was like this," he murmured, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Since university," Claudia never accepted. "Ethical limits." Eloise leaned closer to her husband, caressing his face with infinite tenderness. "Don't strain yourself. My love, rest. She can't hurt us anymore." Edward made a small negative gesture. "I need to know the technology." She wanted our medical automation technology. "For what?" Renard exchanged a look with Eloise before answering. "Apparently, Sterling Tech is developing a competing system, but facing significant technical obstacles. With you incapacitated and the company vulnerable, they could force an acquisition at a reduced price." A flash of understanding crossed Edward's gaze. "Project Aurora." "She found out Aurora," Eloise repeated, confused. "The new AI-assisted diagnostic system?" Edward nodded weakly. "More than that. It's a revolution. Early diagnosis of rare conditions. It would save millions." The understanding of the magnitude of what was at stake left Renard momentarily speechless. It wasn't just a commercial dispute. It was a technology with the potential to radically transform global medical diagnosis. "Rest now," he finally said. "We have time to discuss this when you're recovered. The important thing is that their plan failed, and thanks to a very special little observer." "I want to meet her," Edward murmured before closing his eyes again, exhausted by the effort. "The girl who saved my life." At the hospital reception, Marcia and Livia received medical and psychological care. The girl, despite the traumatic experience, showed surprising resilience. While a child psychologist tried to assess her emotional state, she simply asked, "Is the important man going to get better now? The one who was in the room with the almond smell?" The professional smiled, admiring the child's genuine concern even after all she had been through. "Yes. Livia, thanks to you, he will get better." Marcia, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and awe, could barely believe everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The ordinary life they led, the daily struggle to pay bills, care for her recovering husband, raise her daughter with dignity despite difficulties, had been turned upside down. Roderick approached, offering a glass of water and a comforting smile. "Mrs. Sutton, when you're feeling better, Mrs. Villela would like to speak with you both. It's not urgent, it can be when you feel ready." Marcia nodded, a twinge of apprehension mixing with her tiredness. "Are we in trouble? Because of the job, I mean." Roderick laughed, genuinely amused by such a mundane concern after such extraordinary events. "I believe job trouble is the last thing you need to worry about now. In fact, I suspect your professional life is about to change significantly, for the better." At that moment, As the Sterling city sky began to lighten with the first rays of dawn, various lives intertwined in ways no one could have predicted. A medical technology magnate who had survived a corporate conspiracy, an ambitious executive who had crossed all ethical lines in the name of profit, that nurse who had sold her professional integrity, driven by distorted family loyalty, and at the center of it all, a small 7-year-old girl whose keen senses and unwavering determination had unraveled a mystery that all the specialists and advanced technologies could not decipher. 3 months later, the Sterling Medical Institute buzzed with renewed energy. The scandal involving Claudia Sterling and the attempted sabotage against Edward Villela had become a nationally reported case, transforming what was once merely an excellent hospital into a symbol of ethical resistance in healthcare. In the large main auditorium, decorated with flower arrangements and banners announcing the inauguration of the Livia Sutton Advanced Research Center, hundreds of people awaited the start of the ceremony. Journalists, doctors, researchers, and authorities filled the rows of seats while on stage. A head table was being prepared. Backstage, Livia watched everything with wide eyes, still trying to process how her life had changed so drastically. Dressed in a formal child's outfit that Eloise Villela had personally helped choose, she nervously fiddled with the hem of her dress. "I'm nervous." "Mom," she confessed, looking at Marcia, equally elegant in a navy blue ensemble she could never have afforded on her old salary. "Me too." "Honey," Marcia smiled, adjusting a strand of Livia's hair. "But remember what Eloise said. You just need to be yourself." No one expects a speech from a 7-year-old. The mention of Eloise brought a smile to Livia's face. In recent months, Edward's wife had become a constant presence in their lives, first out of gratitude, then out of genuine affection. It was Eloise who had insisted that Marcia accept the position of employee well-being coordinator at the hospital, a position specially created for her, which now allowed the family to live comfortably. "They're ready for you," an assistant announced, leading mother and daughter to the stage. In the auditorium, Dr. Renard Travers had already begun the presentations, his face showing the satisfaction of someone witnessing the triumph of justice and truth. And so, what began as a baffling medical mystery transformed into a lesson about the power of unassuming observation and childlike intuition. It is with immense honor that we welcome today Livia Sutton, the young girl whose extraordinary perception not only saved Edward Villella's life but also inspired the creation of a completely new safety protocol in our institution. Warm applause greeted Livia and Marcia as they walked to their seats at the table. The girl, intimidated by the attention, clung to the new teddy bear she had received from Edward, a gift that replaced her old worn companion, although she still kept the original as a memento. Edward Villela, recovered though still carrying some mild sequelae that doctors believed would disappear with time, rose to speak. His imposing presence contrasted with the fragility he had shown months earlier in his hospital bed. "When I founded Villela Advanced Technology, I had a dream to create systems that would save lives through technology. Ironically, it was a child without access to any advanced technology who saved my life, using only her natural senses and innate courage." Looking directly at Livia, he continued, "The research center we inaugurate today bears her name not only as a gesture of gratitude, but as a constant reminder to all of us, scientists and doctors. The most sophisticated technology will never replace human intuition and keen observation. These qualities, which Livia demonstrated in abundance, will always be the heart of true medicine." The applause that followed was deafening. Eloise, sitting beside her husband, discreetly wiped away a tear. Her life had also been transformed by the experience, not only by the near loss of Edward, but by the unexpected connection formed with Marcia and Livia, women from a completely different social reality than her own, whom she now considered family. When it was Livia's turn to receive a symbolic certificate, she timidly stood up, approaching the microphone that had to be lowered considerably to accommodate her height. The audience fell silent, curious to hear what the little heroine would say. "I just wanted to help," she said simply, her childish voice echoing through the auditorium. "Because when my dad got sick, no one believed me about the strange smell. So when I smelled the same smell again, I knew I had to make someone listen." The simplicity and honesty of her words touched everyone. At the back of the auditorium, Charles Sutton, still recovering, but now able to walk with the aid of a cane, smiled proudly at his daughter. After the formal ceremony, a more intimate reception was held in the hospital gardens. It was there, amidst more relaxed conversations and glasses of champagne and grape juice for Livia, that Edward shared with Renard and a few selected researchers the details of Project Aurora, the technology that Claudia Sterling had desperately tried to obtain. It's an early diagnostic algorithm that combines body odor analysis with other subtle biomarkers, Edward explained, showing graphs on his tablet. The system can detect minute metabolic changes, which often precede serious conditions by weeks or even months. Like an electronic nose, one of the researchers asked, fascinated. Much more sophisticated, Edward smiled, although, ironically, still not as efficient as Livia's nose. The initial inspiration came from studies on dogs that can detect cancer by smell. But we expanded the concept to a multisensory system that analyzes patterns imperceptible to conventional human senses. Renard, analyzing the preliminary data, shook his head in amazement. This will revolutionize early diagnosis. Conditions like the one you suffered, cyanide poisoning, could be detected before they cause permanent damage. Exactly. And now with the partnership between the Sterling Medical Institute and Vilela Tech, we can finally implement the system on a large scale. That's why Claudia was so desperate to get the technology, Renard concluded. The commercial value is incalculable. Edward nodded, his expression momentarily clouding over. Claudia always saw medicine as a business, not a mission. Project Aurora in her hands would have become an exclusive profit tool, not a benefit for humanity. In another corner of the garden, Livia had found a new friend, Sophia, the 8-year-old daughter of one of the researchers. The two played animatedly near a small ornamental lake, watched from a distance by Marcia and Eloise. I never imagined my daughter would become a celebrity, Marcia commented, still processing the new reality. Eloise smiled, taking a sip from her glass. She deserves all the recognition. Edward and I talked, and we want to ensure her future is bright. We are setting up an educational fund for Livia. She can study wherever she wants, pursue any career she chooses. Marcia swallowed hard, moved. I don't know how to thank you. You've already done so much for us. No thanks necessary, Eloise gently interrupted. If it weren't for Livia, I would be a widow now, and the world would lose not only Edward, but a technology that will save countless lives. We are the ones who are eternally indebted. In the distance, Charles approached the playing girls, walking slowly with his cane. His recovery had accelerated significantly in recent months, thanks to the specialized treatment Edward had insisted on financing. Although he would never regain his former vitality, doctors believed he could eventually resume an almost normal life. "Daddy!" Livia exclaimed, running to hug him. "Did you see? My name is on the big sign." Charles lifted his daughter into his arms, ignoring the pain the effort caused. "I did, my little detective. I'm so proud my chest feels like it's going to burst." Sophia, observing the scene, commented innocently, "Your daughter is very brave, sir. She saved an important man." Charles nodded, blinking to hide the tears that threatened to escape. "She saved me too, you know, and not just that one time at the hospital. She saves me every day just by existing." Meanwhile, in the main meeting room of the Institute, a video conference was underway. On the screen, lawyers discussed the final details of the case against Claudia Sterling and her accomplices. Robert Hayes had accepted a plea bargain, providing devastating details about the criminal operation. Carla Mendoza, surprisingly, refused any deal, taking full responsibility for her actions. In her testimony, she repeatedly mentioned her remorse for having involved Charles Sutton in her initial experiments. Carla's sentence was announced today, one of the lawyers informed. 10 years, with the possibility of parole after 4, considering her cooperation and lack of prior record. Edward, who participated in the meeting remotely while circulating through the reception, nodded gravely. And Claudia? She still denies everything, but the evidence is overwhelming. Sterling Tech has already lost 60% of its market value, and shareholders are suing her for mismanagement and fraud. The expectation is a sentence of between 15 and 20 years. Justice was taking its course, but for Edward the most important thing was the future, not the past. Disconnecting the video conference, He returned to the garden, where the celebration continued. He approached Livia, who was now showing Sophia how to identify different flowers by their scent. "This is jasmine," she explained seriously like a little teacher. "It has a sweet smell, but different from lily. Lily is stronger." "I see we have an aroma expert," Edward commented, crouching with some effort to be at the girl's height. Livia smiled, still shy in the businessman's presence, despite months of familiarity. "I like smells. Mom says I have a puppy nose." Edward laughed, genuinely charmed by the child's naturalness. "Did you know we're developing machines that try to do what your nose does naturally? But none are as good as you." Livia's eyes lit up with the information. "Really? Machines that smell?" "Aye, exactly. And we need specialists to test them. Someone with a nose as good as yours to tell us if we're on the right track." The proposal, made playfully, had a serious undertone. Edward truly believed that Livia's exceptional olfactory sensitivity could contribute significantly to the refinement of Project Aurora's sensors. "I can help," Livia enthusiastically offered. "I can smell all the smells you want." "Then it's a deal. When the lab is ready, you'll be our official aroma consultant." The commitment, sealed with a solemn handshake, made Sophia look at Livia with renewed admiration. "You're really going to work in a lab?" "That's awesome." The night wore on, and gradually the guests began to say their goodbyes. The Villela family and the Sutton family, however, remained until the end, united by an experience that transcended social and circumstantial barriers. As they finally prepared to leave, Edward made an unexpected announcement. "Renard, I want you to personally lead the medical team for Project Aurora. No one better than you who questioned the unquestionable and listened to those everyone ignored, to ensure our technology never loses the human element." The doctor, surprised and honored, readily accepted. "It will be a privilege, Edward. And I promise the first rule of the protocol will be, always listen to children." Everyone laughed, but the humor carried a profound truth that none of those present would ever forget. 6 months later, the Livia Sutton Advanced Research Center was in full operation. The first functional prototype of the Aurora system was already showing promising results in preliminary tests, identifying early markers of neurological, cardiovascular, and oncological conditions with impressive precision. Livia, now newly 8 years old, visited the center regularly after school, wearing a personalized miniature lab coat that the researchers had gifted her for her birthday. She enthusiastically participated in comparative tests between the system and her own sense of smell. "This smells like strawberry, but there's something bitter hidden," she declared, analyzing a coded vial that even the scientists didn't know what it contained. Dr. Patricia Meadows, a neuroscientist responsible for the sensory analysis sector, carefully noted the observation. "Impressive. Livia, the Aurora system detected fruity ester compounds consistent with strawberry aroma, but also traces of bitter alkaloids in minimal concentrations. Can you identify what kind of bitterness it is?" Livia wrinkled her nose, concentrating intensely. "It smells like coffee, but not exactly. More like that dark tea my grandma makes." "Mate," the scientist suggested, increasingly admiring the precision of her descriptions. "That's it. It has a similar bitter taste." Patricia made more notes, exchanging significant glances with her colleagues. Livia's olfactory sensitivity not only helped calibrate the system's sensors, but often identified nuances that the most advanced algorithms still couldn't process correctly. In the center's main office, Edward and Renard discussed the latest clinical test results. "The data is extraordinary," Renard commented, analyzing graphs on a panoramic screen. "The system is identifying Alzheimer's markers up to 8 months before the first cognitive symptoms detectable by conventional methods." Edward nodded, satisfied but not surprised. And the tests for cardiac conditions, though even more impressive. Metabolic changes preceding heart attacks are being detected almost a year in advance, allowing preventive interventions that can literally save thousands of lives. The businessman stood up, walking to the window from which he could observe the main laboratory. Livia was there, working seriously alongside the scientists, her small figure contrasting with the adults around her. "You know what's most extraordinary, Renard?" All of this started with a girl no one listened to. How many Livias are out there, with valuable insights that we ignore because they come from unexpected sources? The doctor joined him in contemplation. That's why the protocol we developed for implementing Aurora in public hospitals necessarily includes a human validation component. Technology suggests, but the final decision always goes through a traditional clinical evaluation. Exactly as it should be, Edward agreed. Technology and humanity working in harmony, not in substitution. In the laboratory, Livia was concluding her testing session. Marcia, who now coordinated a well-being program for patients' families at the Institute, came to pick her up. "How was it today, scientist?" she asked, affectionately helping her daughter put away her lab coat. "Very cool, Mom. I got all the smells right, even the ones the computer couldn't quite identify." Marcia smiled, proud. Livia's confidence had blossomed in recent months. From a shy child who sold flowers on the hospital sidewalk, she had transformed into a brilliant and curious student, with an unlimited future ahead of her. Charles waited for them in the parking lot, at the wheel of the modest but new car they had managed to buy with Marcia's new salary. His recovery had progressed significantly. He had abandoned his cane weeks ago and could now drive without difficulty, although he still attended physical therapy sessions 3 times a week. "My favorite women," he greeted animatedly as they approached. "How was the day for the most important scientists in the United States?" "It was great, Dad. I think I'm going to be a researcher when I grow up. Or a doctor. Or maybe both." The pride on Charles's face was palpable. For a man who had once feared not being able to offer his daughter a dignified future, seeing her now, with all doors open before her, was the greatest possible reward. In the family's new apartment, modest compared to the Villela's standards, but spacious and comfortable in a safe neighborhood, Livia ran to her room, eager to show her father her latest experiment, a small herbarium she was assembling, cataloging plants by their aromas. Meanwhile, in the penthouse of the Montserrat Tower, now owned by the Sterling Medical Institute after the confiscation of Claudia Sterling's assets, a new meeting was taking place. Eloise Villela, who had assumed the directorship of the Villela Tech Foundation for Health Innovation, discussed with representatives from the Department of Health the implementation of the Aurora system in public hospitals across the United States. "The initial installation cost is significant," she explained, "but economic feasibility studies show that the savings generated by early diagnosis and prevention of serious conditions exceed the investment by more than 10-fold over a 5-year period." "And what about maintenance and staff training?" one of the representatives questioned. "The foundation commits to providing free training and technical support for 10 years as part of our mission to democratize access to quality preventive health care." The proposal was ambitious but viable. If fully implemented, it could transform the landscape of American public health, especially concerning conditions difficult to diagnose early. "There's one more thing," Eloise added, opening a folder with additional documents. "We want each unit of the Aurora system in public hospitals to have a small plaque recognizing Livia Sutton as the inspiration for the project." The representatives exchanged curious glances. "The girl from the Villela case?" "Why?" Eloise smiled, recalling everything they had experienced in recent months. "Because she taught us the most valuable lesson, that true innovation comes not only from sophisticated algorithms and state-of-the-art sensors, but from attentive observation and the courage to question the seemingly unquestionable. Each Aurora unit should remind all healthcare professionals that sometimes the most important answer can come from the most unexpected source." The next morning, extraordinary news shook the corporate world. Carla Mendoza had formally requested permission to collaborate from prison with Project Aurora. In a letter addressed to Edward Villela, she offered her pharmaceutical knowledge and her experience with compounds that affect the neurological system to improve the detection algorithms. "I cannot undo the harm I caused," she had written, "but perhaps I can contribute to the good that arose despite my actions." The request sparked intense debate among the team. Renard, initially skeptical, surprised everyone by advocating for the acceptance of the offer. Carla's knowledge of how certain compounds interact in the body is valuable. If she is genuinely remorseful and wants to contribute positively, Why not allow this form of redemption? Edward, after long reflection, agreed. With strict security measures and constant supervision, Carla began to collaborate remotely with the project, analyzing data and suggesting refinements to the algorithms for detecting toxic substances. A full year had passed since that fateful night when Livia first smelled the peculiar odor in Edward Villela's room. Project Aurora was now a reality, with pilot units operating in 5 public hospitals and preliminary results that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. In a simple but significant ceremony, the Sterling Medical Institute inaugurated the Livia Sutton Children's Care Room, a space specially designed for children to await appointments and exams in a welcoming and playful environment. Livia herself, now almost 9 years old, cut the inaugural ribbon, surrounded by school friends who looked admiringly at their friend who had her name on an official plaque. "Do you think I'm important?" Sophia, now Livia's best friend, asked as they explored the new room together. "You are super important," Livia replied with conviction. "Everyone is. The problem is that sometimes adults don't realize it." The simple wisdom of that child, born of extraordinary experiences, perfectly summarized the lesson that had transformed so many lives. True observation knows no hierarchies or prejudices. It sees only what is there, waiting to be discovered by eyes or noses attentive enough. That night, as Livia slept in her room decorated with posters of female scientists that Eloise had helped choose, Marcia and Charles talked on the small balcony of their apartment, contemplating the lights of Sterling City. "Sometimes I still can't believe everything that happened," Charles confessed, holding his wife's hand. "How our life completely changed because of her sensitive nose." Marcia smiled, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. It wasn't just her nose. It was her determination, her courage to insist when no one believed her. "She inherited that from you, you know." "From both of us," Charles corrected. "We've always been fighters, haven't we? And look where we are." Not far away in the Villela mansion, Edward also contemplated the city from his office window. Project Aurora had become his obsession, his legacy, his way of transforming a terrible experience into something that would benefit millions of people. Eloise entered silently, bringing 2 glasses of wine. Thinking about tomorrow's meeting with the international investors, he accepted the glass but shook his head. "I was thinking about how vulnerable we are, how all our technology, all our scientific knowledge can be useless in the face of the simplest things. If it weren't for a 7-year-old girl, who now has a bright future ahead of her," Eloise completed, gently clinking glasses with her husband. "And thanks to her, thousands of other people will too." The next morning, Livia was getting ready for school when she received an unexpected call. It was Renard, inviting her for a special visit to the laboratory. "We have a new prototype for you to test, Livia. Do you think you can come after school?" "Of course," she replied enthusiastically. "What is it this time?" "An ultra-sensitive detector, inspired specifically by your nose. We're calling it the Livia module. If it works as we expect, it will be able to identify compounds in concentrations so low that no other sensor can detect them." The pride she felt at that moment was indescribable. For a girl who not long before was invisible to the world beyond her family, knowing that brilliant scientists had created something inspired by her was the deepest possible validation. "I'll be there," she promised, barely able to wait to tell her classmates the news. As she prepared to leave, she looked at the old teddy bear she still kept in a place of honor on her shelf. That quiet little companion had witnessed her entire journey, from nights at the hospital while her mother cleaned corridors. Through the moment, she noticed the strange smell in Edward's room, to her transformation into a respected little scientist by renowned researchers. "See?" she whispered to the teddy bear in a moment of childish confidence. "Sometimes being different is the most important thing in the world." And with that simple yet profound certainty, Livia Sutton went about another day of her extraordinary life, a life transformed by the courage to trust her own senses, even when the whole world doubted. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Livia Sutton and her incredible discovery has touched your hearts. This account reminds us that great revelations often come from the most unexpected sources, and that we should always pay attention to the small voices around us. To follow more inspiring narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to the left of your screen. If this journey of intuition, courage, and the power of childlike observation touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from and which part of the story moved you the most. Every day we bring unique content that explores the complexity of human life and the extraordinary twists of fate that await us. Until the next story,